Ayo, quick disclaimer. This was all recorded before Critical's Halo 2 LASO Deathless challenge. When I say deathless, I'm talking about not using a cheese to get around the Iron Skull like most solo LASO runs do. I'm not a god gamer, I'm just a goofball trying to make a funny video. Cool? Cool. Why do this to yourself? To get the achievement, of course. It definitely has nothing to do with my crippling self-doubt, and totally isn't a desperate attempt to prove to myself that the countless hours I've devoted to developing a skill with no real-world application was not only a failure yielding low to average results at best, but was also a selfish waste of my ever-diminishing time on Earth that I could have spent learning a craft that would actually benefit others. So what's LASO mean, I hear you asking? LASO is an acronym for Legendary All Skulls On. Legendary is the highest difficulty, and All Skulls On means you need to play with all of the optional difficulty modifiers, known as skulls, enabled. Legendary difficulty is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Enemies do more damage, have more health, and tend to appear as their harder variants with better equipment. The skulls, however, all have unique effects that vary in terms of how much they make me want to die. So let's go through each of those. The first of the 13 skulls is Grunt Birthday Party. All this does is add a splash of confetti and some celebratory cheering every time you headshot a grunt. I Would Have Been Your Daddy simply makes it so that rare and usually funny lines of dialogue have a higher chance of playing than normal. In terms of difficulty, it also has no effect.
It's combat rated and field tested. In fact, I could punch a hole through your helmet with surprisingly little effort.
Cowbell is kind of a weird one. Basically, it pumps up the knockback of everything. Other than making some goofy as hell looking physics, I didn't really notice this one. Getting into skulls that actually increase your score multiplier, we have Tilt. Tilt makes tight matchups more important. Think Pokemon. Energy weapons are super effective on shields, and not very effective on health, while ballistic weapons are the opposite, and this skull just makes that more noticeable. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, but one that you can really leverage in your favor if you know how to. Using the right weapon in the right situation is even more lethal, and you're a bit less vulnerable with your shields down since most enemies use energy weapons. Up next is Fog. Fog on its own would be fairly impactful as it removes your radar, but due to another skull we'll get into later making it redundant, it basically does nothing. The Catch Skull makes enemies throw a lot more grenades and drop more grenades when killed. Like Tilt, this one's a bit of a double-edged sword, albeit one I think that falls much more firmly in the enemy's favor. You're able to use your own supply of plasma nades more freely, and sometimes enemies will choose to whiff a nade when they could just shoot you instead, but that's where the advantages end. Large groups of grunts now coat the field in stickies, and a hidden effect of the skull makes the grenade throwing animation much shorter for enemies, giving you a much smaller window to react before you get stuck. The Famine Skull makes weapons drop with only half the ammo they would normally have. This skull makes power weapons much less abusable and forces you to stick your head out of cover to resupply much more often than you'd like to. There are usually plenty of energy weapons around, but headshot weapons are often few and far between, making missing shots very punishing. Mythic is a fun and interactive skull. It doubles enemy health. While this might sound like a huge disadvantage, it's not one that tends to matter much as headshots are still an instant kill on unshielded enemies. The only notable exceptions are brutes and hunters. The former can have their helmets knocked off and are still quite vulnerable to super combines, and the latter, well, you might want to throw on a podcast or something. You're gonna be here a while. Thunderstorm upgrades most enemies to a higher rank, which usually not only increases their health, but gives them better shields, AI, and weaponry. A special mention for this skull goes to grunts, who are quite frequently upgraded to grunt ultras who have helmets that must be knocked off before they can be headshot. Tough Luck doesn't give any stat upgrades to enemies, but instead affects their behavior. Defensively, enemies become much more slippery, almost always diving out of the way of high damaging attacks. And offensively, they become much more unrelenting, no longer flinching from most attacks and not backing down even if leader units are killed, which would normally cause them to panic. Getting into the top 3, we get the real heavy hitters. These are what make LASO feel like an entirely different game instead of just a tier up from Legendary. Up first we have Blind. The Blind Skull removes all elements of your HUD, your crosshairs, your ammo counter, even your weapons. Not only is your aim really put to the test with no training wheels, but you are also missing out on critical information. You can check what weapon you are currently holding by hitting tab, but the amount of ammo it has left is a total mystery, which can leave you high and dry at the worst of times. You can mostly subvert the skull by putting a piece of tape in the center of your screen or using a third-party crosshair program, but I ain't no bitch. Well, I'm definitely a bitch, but it's not in the spirit of the game. Penultimately, we have Black Eye. Black Eye makes it so your shields don't regenerate unless you melee an enemy. Getting a melee is usually only possible when you've picked through all of the enemies in an area and are left with a lonely grunt or jackal you can bully. This means you have to take every fight extremely carefully as all shield damage taken is effectively permanent, until you can sneak in a smack without getting lit up. The silver lining to this is that your health actually will regenerate on its own if you don't take damage for a few seconds, but this only works to an extent. There are 2 thresholds in your health bar, one at about 2/3 health and one at about 1/3 health. If your health falls below a threshold, it will only regenerate up to that threshold, so if you get damage down to half health from full, you'll only regenerate up to 2/3 your total health. The pro to this con, however, is that Reach allows you to use health packs to instantly restore your health to full, which conveniently also starts regenning your shields, no melee required. Finally, we have Iron. The skull isn't too bad in co-op. It only requires you to reset to the last checkpoint if any player dies, instead of allowing you to respawn on one another. Playing this solo, however, it removes checkpoints entirely. If you die at any point during the sometimes hour-plus long missions, you have to reset to the very start. And I know what you're thinking. Skelly, if you can't die in the missions anyway, why did you put "without dying" in the title? To clickbait us? Well, yes, obviously. But also, because if you've ever attempted to play LASO yourself, you'll know that any guide worth its salt will immediately mention to use the save and quit glitch. To perform the glitch, simply save and quit when you die before you respawn at the beginning of the level. The game doesn't acknowledge you as having died until you respawn. So instead, when you resume the mission, it'll simply reload you in at the last checkpoint you hit, just as if Iron wasn't on at all. But just like with Blind, we're not taking the easy way out. If I die at the end of the mission, I'll have to do it all again. Because I fucking hate myself. With all the skulls covered, let's cover a few techniques you'll see me using throughout the playthrough. The first thing you'll probably notice is that when I take fights, I usually take shots from as far away as possible. Enemies have a limited range in which they will actually return fire, so if at all possible, I want to fight them outside of that range. If I'm forced to fight within their range, I'm going to be attempting to do so from cover that only exposes my head. In Halo, and most other FPSs, the player's shots actually come out of their head, not their weapon, in order to make the shots go exactly where the player is aiming. Combining this with the fact that enemies will always target center mass on the player, this means that if you only expose your head, you'll be able to shoot enemies while they spray ineffectively into your cover. One of the situations you'll see me breaking these rules for, however, is when I'm backstab fishing. If you manage to close the distance with an elite without taking damage, you'll survive his melee and have just enough time to circle around and backsmack him for an insta-kill while he's locked in the animation. After a fight is over, you'll often see me shoot an overcharged plasma pistol shot into a health pack before picking it up. The reason for this is that you're not actually able to pick up health packs at full health, even though they also recharge your shields. Overcharged plasma pistol shots do a tiny bit of splash damage, meaning that if I shoot one into the health pack right in front of me, it'll damage me just enough to pick up the health pack and get full shields back. Lastly, you'll often hear me refer to using speedrun strats. This generally means taking a specific path to run past all the enemies safely, or using a trick to skip part of the level. If I do any part of it differently for LASO, I'll stop and explain what I did differently, but otherwise, check out my video on speedrunning for the full context. Whereas this video is made to be more concise and entertaining, that video goes much more in depth with what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, so if you're curious, check it out. Links in the description. I'll also throw a link to Silver's LASO guide over on the Halo Completionist channel. I used a lot of his strategies in my run, so if you're looking for an in-depth guide to do this yourself, I'd recommend checking out his videos. Man, that was a long intro. Well, without further ado, I'm Afroskelly, and this is Halo Reach Solo LASO Deathless. Winter Contingency was pretty straightforward. Speedrun strats worked to run past all the enemies in the beginning, and although I whiffed the EMP on the Falcon, the firefight I had to do instead was pretty easy. At least once I realized Noble Team was too stupid to walk around my truck.
Can't make it, the shit's stuck! Out of my way, son!
The firefight at Sword Base was much the same. Hide way in the back and wait for Cat to close the door.
Door stuck! Door stuck!
Aside from a few close calls with a conch rifle, and an incident in which I was forced to hide in the rafters from the Sword Elite like a cat stuck in a tree that I don't want to talk about. Oh god. Oh god. The inside of the facility went smoothly too. I had one sloppy death at the first firefight, but other than that, it was a clean mission. On to the next. ONI Sword Base was a good bit more of a struggle than the first mission.
No! Noble 6 said it best.
The firefight right at the beginning alone claimed a lot of deaths. Being right at the start, however, meant it was a really quick reset, and I eventually developed a pretty safe and efficient strategy.
Oh god, hi!
I would rush the elite on the right side to get him out of the way, before pushing all the way down on the far left.
I swear I'm gonna die to one of those spinning elite grunt corpses one of these days.
This got one of the more troublesome enemies out of the way, and gave me a good vantage point to pick off jackals who exposed their heads while falling back. From here, it was just trial and error as I used the noob combo and Cat's immense strength to pick my way through the remaining enemies. Outside the base, I used the target locator to pick off one of the wraiths, before killing the other enemies in the area and hijacking the other wraith. This was easier said than done. On LASO, the elite pilot actually has more health than the wraith itself, so you have to board and punch the hatch off before letting go and hopping back on manually to kill the driver through the now open hatch. From here, I headed off to the AA guns. The wraith let me slowly and safely clear through the enemies along with all their reinforcements, with the exception of the general up top, who I just decided to ignore since I could hit the button he was guarding through the floor anyway. Then I headed off to the communications array, being sure to head back the way I came instead of doing the full circle to avoid the enemies that spawn on that route.
No! He threw 2!
Second verse same as the first, easy clear with the wraith and move on. On my way back though, I ran into something I was entirely unprepared for. The dreaded, the dangerous, shark elites. Unfortunately for them, elites can't swim, giving this fun summer beach episode an abrupt and tragic end. Back at Sword Base, I used what was left of the target locator to clear out the enemies waiting for us and picked off the remaining stragglers with some help from Cat. And that's when I ran into a problem. 2 armor-clad behemoths with approximately 1 metric fuck-ton of health thanks to the Mythic Skull, who needed to die for the elevator to open up. I was at a loss. I tried explosives, picking away at their bits of exposed flesh, but nothing seemed to be making a dent. I fell back to regroup and gather my thoughts when I realized something. Cat didn't follow me up the ramp. Now don't get me wrong, she was trying to follow me, but her Galaxy Brain AI didn't take elevation into account, so instead of running up the ramp to follow me, she ran down the ramp to stand directly beneath me. This meant that if I ran to stand directly above the hunters, Cat, Hunter Puncher Extraordinaire, would get to work. And get to work she did. It took an agonizingly long 20 plus minutes, but eventually, with her fists of steel and my occasional sneaky shots to the back, the 2 beasts fell.
Oh, did she kill it? Oh, Cat, I love you dearly.
And then I went up the elevator and died immediately.
No! Oh.
With no desire to do that ever again, I decided to take a break and think. I thought long and hard, searched the deepest recesses of my brain, and came up with a foolproof strategy.
What's up guys, Silver here with part 2 of our journey.
Thank you, Silver.
So this time, instead of ignoring the Gauss hog that gets delivered to you once you clear the second objective, I stowed it away off to the side, made the Marines promise not to touch it.
No, you're not. You are not driving. You are not driving, sir.
cleared it a path to Sword Base using the Wraith, and drove it on in once I was done. With the hunters dispatched in a much more timely fashion, I headed up the elevator and followed the good word of Silver once again. I charged forward with naught but my faith is my shield, and watched the elite perform the true combo of taunt to get bodied.
Damn, son.
With Noble Team backing me up, I cleared my way easily through the first floor of enemies before using the speedrun skip to head the rest of the way up unhindered. Once at the top, I took it slow. The Jackals went down pretty easy to rockets, while the invisible elites proved to be a bit more of a problem. But if anime has taught me anything, it's that no problem is too great to be overcome by the power of friendship. So I hid in the back while George and Emil did all the dirty work. A couple of rocket shots later, and I had successfully cowered my way through the second mission, with 19 more deaths to my name. Nightfall was an absolute breeze. Turns out the Iron Skull ain't so bad when the whole mission can be finished in about 3 minutes. Aside from one quick death early on,
Oh god, hi guys.
I followed the speedrun strats with absolutely no issues. I even got the forklift skip first try. Tip of the Spear was another mercifully easy mission. Speedrun strats served me well again, although it feels hardly fitting to call them speedrun strats when it takes a whole 16 barrages to take down an AA gun.
Mythic is a fun and interactive skull.
I got my first and only death at the end of the Warthog section,
Don't get blown up that well. Or do.
but the second time around I took more of a scorched earth approach and didn't have any problems. The second AA gun features 2 wraiths and more hunters! You're not technically required to kill these ones, but I wasn't really eager to get in the Falcon when it showed up. After chewing through their mountains of health from the safety of my Revenant, it was time for the Falcon ride. The elites were far too tanky to be taken out by the nade turret, but fortunately, the Cowbell Skull gave me another delightful way of dealing with them.
Oh, goodbye, buddy.
I took the approach to the Spire slow and steady with George backing me up, but once I made it to the truck, I made the rest of my assault swift and decisive, and capped off the mission with a bang. Long Night of Solace. This mission lives up to its title in every respect on LASO.
No!
At the start, I tried using speedrun strats to skip past most of the enemies on the beach, but once it started to feel a bit too much like D-Day,
I get it. Well, alright, cool. You stuck me. Well.
I decided to rethink my approach. I let Noble Team lead the way, and once the enemies were distracted, I snuck my way down to the end of the section. The conveniently placed bubble shield helped me stall while I waited for backup, and the fully stocked DMR helped me clean house once Noble Team arrived. Once inside, I politely asked this Marine for his rockets, and after a slight disagreement,
I feel bad.
his buddy kindly agreed to share his ammo with me.
Now I don't have to.
With topped up rockets and a sword, I headed into the space section. The space section is mercifully unchanged on LASO. The only real noticeable skulls are blind forcing you to manually lead your shots, and Mythic making Seraphs take an extra barrage of rockets. This all being said, your ship still feels like it's made out of paper mache, so I hid behind Anchor 9 in the first section, and tucked up against the belly of the Corvette in the second. The only notable difference in strategy was using free-aimed rockets to take out the Phantoms from behind the defenses of Anchor 9, instead of venturing out to get a lock on. Landing on the Corvette for the first time, I remembered that this Marine really wants you to hold him back.
Don't hold me back, Doc! Don't hold me back! Oh, okay, then don't worry.
Not only does him charging the elite stop you from getting the kill, but his dumbass falls down and spooks all the other elites. It's still doable afterwards, but it's much harder with all of the enemies on high alert. Running it back, I path blocked him and had a much better time.
I'm gonna hold him back with one finger! He's like a little baby. He can't get past me.
I got a cheeky kill with rockets and abused the fact that elites can't shoot while jetpacking to clean up the rest. With the room clear, I grabbed a needle rifle and started the first of many adrenaline-filled, high-intensity, non-stop action crate-pushing sections. Yeah, the cover is so bad you literally have to make your own. After a quick push down the hallway to snipe out the engineer and aggro the room, I fell back to the box and waited for the enemies to funnel into my sights. After a few close calls with the elites, I pushed into the room and picked off the last 2 snipers way in the back to finish out the section. With a fresh batch of Marines in tow, I pushed hard right to backsmack the 2 elites I spooked, and picked up another 2 free backsmacks on the distracted elites in the next room. Then, like a heartless Payday 2 host, I kicked all the randoms before trying to stealth. But no heist would be complete without a bit of pre-planning, and by pre-planning, I mean crate pushing. With my backup plan in place, I masked up and got to work. I was able to drop 2 of the elites before the eagle-eyed general in the back sounded the alarm.
Oh, he might have been aggroed. Yep. Time to leave.
My crate friend gave me cover as I took out the sword elite and the remaining grunts, and then I pushed into the room and abused the tough luck skull to panic the general with my needle rifle for an easy backsmack.
I'm losing control of the situation!
Whew! With the room clear, I got back to abusing box strats harder than an XCOM team in Newfoundland. At least this time I had a sword to make it a little bit less painful. Literally.
What we're gonna do is very similar to when we took the entrance to the hangar. Ow.
After having a great time for over 10 minutes, I hit the button and watched my genius plan, watched the results of my menial labor unfold. The first set of crates stopped reinforcements, or the important ones at least, and the second set of crates prevented them from falling back further down the hallway. I guess you could say I used those crates to make a real kill box. The third set of crates was used to completely block off a group of reinforcements in the next room, letting me skate on by back to the main hangar and my final objective, the Pelican turret. Bungie decided to include an Easter egg that lets you control the Pelican's nose gun if you crouch next to it and hold interact, which is a godsend on LASO, as the turret itself is completely invincible. If I could just make it past the group of enemies between me and it, I would be set. With George drawing aggro, I used my needle rifle to get to work on the distracted cubbies. The elite began to make me feel a bit cramped in my hallway, so I decided to slip past him to get a bit of breathing room. And that's when I heard the deck's automatic doors slide open behind me, and the sounds of curious and angry jackals. As it turns out, the final wave of enemies is triggered by entering the room, not by clearing out the enemies like I thought. With panic setting in and enemies beginning to spawn all around me, I dodged and dived to the Pelican, until finally, after 12 agonizing deaths, the long night was over. I had found my solace. My seizure-inducing solace. I won't subject you to any more of this eye strain, but rest assured, despite the headache it caused, I was more than happy to snipe out the last of my foes from the safety of my invincible turret. Timidly emerging from my shelter, I ran up to George and finally brought an end to this box-based nightmare.
Oh! Fueling track with the Covenant Super
God.
76 seconds to endpoint.
Exodus was up next, and I was not looking forward to it. From the grueling combat sections to the Banshee RNG, it sounded like hell.
Whoa, why?
At least there was no possible way I could die in the opening section.
I swear I'm gonna die to one of those spinning elite grunt corpses one of these days.
Speedrun strats worked well enough, but on LASO, ammo felt especially scarce. Needler ammo was completely RNG.
I got 1 needler. Are you shitting me right now?
And the limited amount of precision weapons meant I needed every shot to be a headshot.
Remember, no Russian.
And of course, there's civvies running around everywhere, so I had to be sure to look out for these precious babies. Luckily, the brutes aren't the smartest foes. But I for sure was not going to underestimate my opponents.
Fortunately, he doesn't seem to be very accurate. Okay.
Once I finally cleared through the first combat section, it was back to the usual speedrun jetpack shenanigans up until the helipad. Instead of busting through the front doors with a rocket launcher, I headed around the backside of the building for a stealthier approach. I got a cheeky backsmack on the dreaded fuel rod chieftain, at least most of the time.
Oh no. Well, that's That's bad.
And once he was down, I retreated to the safety of the upper balcony. From here, I whittled away at the enemies below me, being extra careful not to catch any of the civilians in the crossfire.
Stop it! Don't kill civilians!
Once the helipad was clear, I hopped onto the Falcon and started praying for good Banshee RNG.
No!
God is dead to me. After running it back and dying a second time before even making it to the Banshees, I decided to make a blood sacrifice to our Lord and Savior RN Jesus and hop on the other Falcon, which to my surprise, actually took a decently safer path. Decently safer. Now, Silver's strategy for taking the beach revolved around two things. Trusting your AI to be actually able to kill shit in the Warthog, and speedrunning the last few objectives. Considering I had absolutely zero trust in the AI, and no interest in risking anything this far into the level, I took a different approach. While the Marines acted as a distraction, I took out the Ghost and pushed on to my actual target. Dodging plasma blasts with my jetpack, I sniped out the gunner, launched an EMP, dispatched the pilot, and took the Wraith for my own. With infinite mortar shots at my disposal, I took every precaution not to lose all my progress. After bombarding every inch of the map,
Burning holy fire!
I hopped out, hit the button, and ended Exodus with only 10 deaths. For a level with a ton of RNG, New Alexandria went surprisingly well. Side objectives were a navigational nightmare without markers, but in terms of difficulty, it mostly just came down to kiting the ever-growing horde of Banshees. Yeah! I found keeping a respectful distance reduced them to nothing more than floating threateningly.
Hi guys, that is so menacing.
While hiding out on a building was less effective.
Yep. Take off please.
Other than flying in circles for 5 minutes looking for Buck, the side objectives didn't give me any trouble. Speedrun strat served me well at the Soviet Center, and gave me an opportunity to safely clear up the Banshee-infested waters below. The Banshee skip made the hospital similarly simple. I just made sure to free up a few extra plasma pistols before going up to snag the Banshee in case I whiffed all my shots like a moron, or something. The telecom tower was the only majorly different objective, with the meta strategy actually being to activate the dance party Easter egg. And the one that makes the music sad. With both of these active, only the brutes actually aggro, so I cleared out the barkeeps and DJ, and bounced. The last objective was pretty easy. I just kept the Banshees at an arm's length while I cleared out the turret.
No! Why am I a moron?
After a quick run back, I made extra sure to maintain my social distance, and the rest of the level was a cakewalk. 5 more deaths, 2 levels to go. Overall, the package was pretty painless. The starting area's turrets proved to be a bit obnoxious, but with proper positioning, it went down easily enough, and the rest of the enemies fell in turn. The tank section was a breeze. Not only do you get a tank, but it turns out head glitching is even better in a tank. Surprisingly, even when you get in a vehicle, the AI still aim for center mass on your player model, which in a tank is about here. This means that if you throw your Scorpion in reverse, you can peek out around corners and take shots without them even shooting back. I almost felt bad for them. Hell, even without the extra cheese, the AI was in shambles this mission.
Oh hi, what the hell? Did he? Oh, he flipped his ghost! He flipped his ghost! What a moron! I say fuck it. Alright. I am.
The blind spell made Banshees a bit of a pain to deal with, but the rest of the enemies provided me with pretty easy shots.
You know, if he's willing to expose himself, I will take it.
With the tank at the end of its road, I took the extra time to run back and grab a Revenant to make sure the speedrun strats were safe, instead of trying them on a ghost like an idiot.
That's bad. That's...
Finally inside Sword Base, Noble Team was here to back me up. In spite of this, the stairwell was still pretty scary. Not hard, but scary.
Oh god, hi. Got a fuel rod cannon though. Let's try to blow up some of these shielded boys.
The Stealth Elite room went down pretty easy, and it was on to the last section. Looking to vehicle cheese some more, I decided to go for the speedrun strats and thankfully got the nicest Banshee pilot imaginable. His buddy, on the other hand, was an absolute prick. Whenever I wasn't burying my face in a corner, I was getting lit up, and at risk of losing the Banshee, I decided to just hide it and myself under the overhang with Noble Team. It wasn't perfect cover, and a couple nades came far too close for comfort, but it just needed to last until the Wraith came in, and thankfully, it did. Once I was in the tank, the rest of the level went off without a hitch. My little hidey hole kept me safe from the phantoms in between waves, and I even got revenge on the prick in the Banshee. After one terrifying encounter with the Gold General,
Why won't you die?
I finished the level with only 6 deaths, and a growing glimmer of confidence. There was only one more mission and I was really getting the hang of things. How bad could it be? The Pillar of Autumn was absolute hell.
Fuck!
The beginning wasn't too bad. Other than a few slip-ups due to fatigue and dodgy AI, it was a simple backsmack and run. The Scarab section wasn't nearly as exciting as normal, but taking it slow made it risk-free. Speedrun strats proved simple and effective in the Wraith section, and then it was on to the caves. Due to the Famine Skull, I didn't have the extra ammo in the conch rifle to spend on the caves despawn. But fortunately, the skip is actually possible without it. Just extremely hard. I wasted a ton of time trying to get the jump, and while I did get it a few times,
There we go. No!
I ultimately decided to give up on it and fight through the caves like normal. After several hours of playing, my aim became so cracked the buggers turned into a game of Galaga, and the jackals at the end were nothing more than neatly wrapped boxes of ammo. At the end of the caves, I grabbed a bubble shield and followed the speedrun route up to the top of the Boneworks. I used the Spartan laser to clear out the turrets and the ghosts, and the sniper to clear out the grunts waiting for me on the landing. Running through the next section was scary without sprint, but my bubble shield had my back.
Never mind.
After heading into the next room, I jumped over the safety rails down to the lower floor. The lower floor was actually a really safe place to snag some easy I was saying, the lower floor was actually a really safe place to— What are you even doing here? The lower floor was actually a kinda safe place where I could sometimes get free backsmacks on grunts heading downstairs. Once the coast was clear, I parkoured my way up to the catwalk. After safely jumping down and successfully despawning the hunters, I left my marines to die once again and busted through the windows. Before I spawned the enemies in this area, I took the time to set up some box strats up top and grab a full DMR from the crate. Once I was ready, I backed up to the start and spawned everything in. I popped the snipers up top, slowly wore my way through the shield jackals, and helped Emil out in his epic duel with the Sword Elite. It's kinda funny, despite being the most dangerous enemy in the area, he's actually totally harmless as long as you're up on— How the fuck?
All these bullshit blazing. Still my heart is blazing.
Once that group was clear,
Throw another nade at you. Oh! Yo! That was fucking cool.
I took a plasma pistol up top and picked off the reinforcements from a safe distance. Fortunately, the boxes always work to block— Are you kidding me? In the event of box failure, some Doom-style dodging did the trick, and the section was clear. I went back for my conch rifle and nabbed the extra needle rifle ammo on my way out. After clearing out the 3 enemies in my way, I headed out to the final holdout. 30 minutes into the attempt, it was finally time to do the infamous conch rifle jump up to the mass driver. If I failed here, there wouldn't be enough shots for a second attempt, and all my progress thus far would be wasted. Heart pounding, I hopped up onto the railing, and failed.
Fuck, dude.
My nerves got the best of me. My brain was absolutely swimming in doubts and I just couldn't execute. I held out as long as I could, but I knew the attempt was doomed. Once I finally made it back an hour later, I got my second chance and actually did it. But even then, it wasn't fast enough to take out the Phantom in the first wave. I pushed through the second wave and was able to get that one, but before I could clear out the enemies, my needle rifle ran dry.
Got a couple of boys down here. Oh, those were my last 2 shots, huh?
I desperately searched for any way to trigger the next wave before dropping, but it was all to no avail. I accepted my fate, and at least took out one of the chieftains with me before going down. When I made it back a third time, I decided to try something different. Knowing that I couldn't get up top fast enough to take out the Phantom in the first wave, I instead took my time to juggle a DMR with me from the last area. I tried using Silver Strat of glitching one weapon through the door, but when that didn't work, I resigned myself to burning through the ammo on the ground. My DMR soon ran dry, but then it hit me. If I brought down the number of enemies to 3 before making the jump, I only had to rely on needle rifle ammo to take out 1 enemy before the next wave started. I pushed down the stairs and scavenged what I could to take out the rest of the enemies. The DMR crate usually glitched out on me, but even without it, I was able to use the sniper and pistol decently well in its place. It wasn't a strategy without its risks, and of course, once it was all said and done, I still had to make the jump, but once it finally all came together and I was up top with a full needle rifle and only a handful of enemies left in the first wave, it felt incredible. I cleared through the second wave with little trouble, and wiped out both the Phantoms in the final wave. Now all that was left to do was drop down and take out the brute chieftains.
I don't know if his shields are up. What? No! No, come on!
In spite of all my efforts, the Hammer Chieftain dashed my dreams with a god tyrannade. Back to square one. After several grueling hours of premature deaths and failed jumps, I finally found myself back in the same situation. And this time, I was ready for revenge. I dropped the last 2 Phantoms, jumped down, and grabbed a plasma pistol. I backpedaled looking for the Hammer Chieftain I knew had to be bounding toward me, but to my surprise, he was nowhere to be seen. In spite of the uneasy feeling hanging over me, I seized the opportunity to engage the Fuel Rod Chieftain. I narrowly dodged volley after volley, and once I had finally burned through his shields, armor lock, and dodges, the tyrant fell. And to my disbelief, the wave ended.
Wait, that's it? What happened to the Hammer Chieftain?
It wasn't until I looked at the theater mode file after the fact that I found out what happened to the Hammer Chieftain. And sadly, due to an update that broke old theater mode files, the footage has been lost to time. So instead, enjoy this artist's rendition of approximately what it looked like. That's right, when I took out the final Phantom, the Hammer Chieftain was crushed by the wreckage. Talk about dumb luck. The section I had been dreading was finally out of the way, but the mission wasn't over yet. A squad of the Covenant's best elites stood between me and the mass driver, and pushing through them was not going to be easy. The first elite was kindly waiting for me at the door. I picked off his grunts, tactically used my drop shield to snag one of their plasma pistols, and took him out from a safe distance. 1 down, 3 to go. Pushing up to the door, I was able to take out the rest of the supporting cast. The grunts offered themselves up as easy targets, and I was able to get a nasty angle to super combine the engineer all the way in the back. With only the elites left, it was time to take one more leap of faith. According to Silver, if you pushed far enough into the room, the elites would fall back and be easier to fight, but I had never tried the strategy out myself. I topped up my health and charged the bit of machinery in the center of the room for a trial by fire. The elites immediately took interest as I started climbing up the back, and before I could even make it to the platform, they dropped my shields. I made it as far into the room as I needed to and immediately bailed, and to my relief, once I returned with full health, the elites had tucked themselves into the back corner. Thanks, Silver. With room to breathe, I took my time, and as many health packs as I needed, and dispatched the next 2 elites from the safety of the stairs. Once they were both down, it was just me and the field marshal. His weaponry was fearsome, and just one stray shot would have spelled my demise. But I had one thing he couldn't touch. A chain link fence.
What am I? What am I? What am I?
With his shots bouncing harmlessly off and mine passing harmfully through, I wore down his shield and put my final opponent to rest with a shot to the head. I grabbed a health pack, a hologram, and got ready to take the last shot of the whole campaign. I waited at the top of the stairs for my cue, and once it came, I drew the Phantom fire with my hologram and hopped into the mass driver. The Phantoms turned to fire on me sooner than expected, but it didn't matter. The mass driver was charged, and with a huge sense of relief, I fired the shot. But the carrier didn't fall. A shiver ran down my spine. Had I really missed? All my training failed me in this final moment? But then I remembered. Mythic is a fun and interactive skull.
Please, please. Fuck yes! Let's go! Woo! Oh my god. 6. You've earned this. I've earned this. It's time to go quietly into that good night. A challenge where you couldn't die the entire time. It's finally time to let it happen.
I sat there and let the atmosphere wash over me. The beautiful piano, the haunting vista, and the final objective I could never complete. As I watched my weapons bounce pitifully off my impossibly strong foes, I couldn't help but feel a kinship with 6. I had fought and struggled for over 20 hours to win a battle that was doomed from the start. I know no matter what challenges I set for myself, how many achievements I take off a list, it'll never be enough to completely overcome the self-doubt I struggle with on a daily basis. But there's a beautiful peace in defeat. Not every story ends with a triumphant ride off into the sunset. Not everyone gets to win. But when you put everything you've got into the attempt, you have no choice but to let yourself rest when it's all over. You can sit there with a smile as everything you've feared comes to pass, accepting that you did all you could, even if it wasn't enough. Or you can sit there with a smile as you turn it into some dumb meme-y bullshit and put it on the internet. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Hey, thank you so much for watching. You might notice I look a little bit different than I did at the start of the video. It's been about 1.5 years that I've been working on this. Might have to change the name of the channel because I don't really have the afro anymore, but C'est la vie. You also might notice that I sound a little bit different. I would love to tell you that it's because I got a fancy new microphone, but as a matter of fact, this one has a directional recording setting, which is what I normally use because, you know, it's just me talking to the microphone and I want to pick up as little background noise as possible. But you see, I turned the microphone the wrong way around after turning that setting on, and I was talking into the back of the microphone for the entire video. So no, I didn't get any fancy new equipment. I'm just an idiot. With this video, I really wanted to push myself creatively, and I'm really glad that I did. I feel like I really got a chance to get to know my tools a lot better. I feel a lot more comfortable with Photoshop and Premiere, and I'm really at a point where I feel like if there's a shot I want to do, I can do it. It might take some Googling, and I might have to work on it for maybe longer than it's worth, but I can get it there eventually. And that's a really freeing feeling creatively, because I don't feel limited by my lack of experience anymore, and that's really nice. It's, you know, a very similar place to how I feel with my coding, which I spent 4 years and a shit ton of money getting a computer science degree for, and I still have to Google stuff for. Anyway, I would have to say my favorite scene, and the scene that easily took the longest, combined with the fact that Halo Infinite and Elden Ring came out in between now and when I started this video, the anime scene is really what pushed it to go this long, because I had to cut out so many different frames of animation for all of the different characters, and it was really just a lot of hard work bringing that to life, but it was a really fun process. Because, you know, I know it's shitty and it's goofy, but it's a musically driven fight scene, and I love those, and getting to make one of my own was just so much fun. It's super neat to me, because if I had had the theater mode footage to work off of, I never would have made the anime scene. None of that would have ever happened. I would have just shown you the actual theater mode footage. So to be able to have this story of creativity through limitation is super cool to me, because I feel like that's how a lot of my favorite things came to be. Oftentimes you're not as creative as you can be until you have to be. I actually went back and looked frame by frame through old Naruto episodes to really try to nail that shadow clone poof. It's all shitty, but it serves its purpose and it works, and that's super cool to me. Same thing with the Pokemon scene. It looks really fucking clean. And that's because I went in and I went frame by frame through footage of Pokemon Emerald on YouTube to see, okay, how many times does the Pokemon sprite blink when it gets hit? How far up and down does the health bar move when it gets hit? And being able to bring this thing from my childhood to life and put my own spin on it is just so cool. And I know people 20-something years ago, oh god, I'm old, were able to do this, and you know, I'm doing it now with way better tools and the ability to look at their work and just work off of it. But it's still super cool to me that I was able to replicate it and it looks good. This has been super fun. I'm really glad I did it, and thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Does that read? Goodbye.